Live streaming is on.
Hello, everybody. Sorry, we've got a lot of technical issues today. As you can see, first was the sound, then YouTube screwing around as usual this week. I'm checking YouTube now to see if we're in. Yes, we're in. Again, sorry, everybody. But we're in. First, the message that I've been saying this week to all of you. And if you don't want to listen, you can quit this channel now. Wear your fucking mask. It's not for you. Or it's for you too. But it's especially for the people that are around you. If you want to kill yourself, that's your problem. There you go. But
we do the whole meeting like this?
Nah. But if you want to kill yourself, that's your problem. It's your life. But it's not you I'm worrying about. I'm worried about the people on the other side of that mask. If you don't wear it, you can kill people. So, to summarize, don't be an asshole. Wear a mask.
That should be the whole advertisement for it.
Marketing. With the public service announcement. And again, if you don't like what
don't be an asshole. Wear a mask.
If you don't like what I just said, you can quit this channel now. I don't care. I care about people's life more than I care about viewers. So, in the other side of this is my dear friend, Magical Man, Mr. Adam Glass. Thank you for your patience. How are you, Adam?
I'm great, David. Thank you for having me, brother. Anytime it's a chance to talk to you, I'm cool.
Thank you. Likewise, as you know. How are you? How's the family? How's everything around you?
It's good. Like anybody else, we're dealing with the insanity that is, Corona in America. I'd like to start by apologizing to the world that we can't get our shit together. So sorry. But I got two kids who one's a teenager, one's a freshman in college. So it's hardest on them. I'm at that age where sitting home every night isn't hard for me. So I don't mind it. But for them, I feel bad. I wish they can get out more. On the flip side, I've been busy as heck. So I'm really blessed. I'm lucky, a lot of work. So it's also been nice to just be able to focus and be in one place and do it. So, I'm a writer. So writers, we're used to being, locked in a room by ourselves and not going out a lot. So, this is like Corona's perfect for writers. So we're like everybody I'm talking to, all my friends are like, I caught up on all my stuff. It's like we're always like dragging 6 months behind or a year behind, and we have projects that, and stuff like that. And, we all feel incredibly blessed to be working during this time because we know how many people aren't working.
Yeah. Are you overworking?
In
the sense that many people is telling me that by the end of the day, they don't realize, because they say, well, it's the same for us always because we're always locked at home working. But they look at the page or, the computer and they're like, shit, I've done more than usual. Why is it? But they don't realize why.
I'm always overworking, Dave.
That's also true. In your case, that's also true.
Yeah. I'm a Russian Jew. I think the Cossacks are coming any moment to take everything from me. So I'm just working and working and working, trying to make what I can and do what I can. So that's sort of always been my mentality. So, but I hear you. Like, you'll wake up, like when I say wake up, you'll finish something. You're like, oh my God, it's 10 o'clock at night. Like I've been here since 9 this morning. It's like the hours sometimes can slip away.
Mm-hmm. And what is what you miss the most?
I think like anybody
to you and say this is over. First thing you do.
First thing I do is probably hug everybody.
Okay, fair enough.
Starting with you, Dave. I'm going to fly to Spain. Well, you know me. I miss Spain. I was fortunate to be there and really get taken in by the people. I was about to shoot my Netflix show. We were 5 days away from shooting. I'd been there for almost 9 weeks when this all happened, and I was sort of pulled out of Spain. But I so fell in love with your country and the people. And what I love the most is how much your people love each other, and just the celebrations in the streets and the everyday. I kept saying to everybody that I could tell, like I was just blown away by the camaraderie, that you all have, and sort of the pride that you have, and the love of life that you have, and how you take care of each other. Like, so different than what unfortunately we're dealing with in our country right now. So the brotherhood, the sisterhood, and all that stuff. And I met incredible people. I was lucky enough to have an assistant, Noah, who just, would teach me everything about Spain. And she was such a lovely soul. And if you're out there watching, I'm sending my love and Noah to you and Jose. just again, like everything from the museums to the people to the history, to just the common good. I mean, I can't say enough. I can't wait to get back. And I think the first thing actually I would do after I hugged everybody is get on a plane and head back to Spain.
Mm-hmm. It's funny because I remember a conversation I had with an executive years ago that I think really defines this. I think I told you the story. We were talking about basketball, and the definition for him was basketball it's always American basketball is going to be better because we have the best individual players. And I was just, you see Spain wins, right? And so we're like, why?
I know what you're going to say. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, we are, because Spain doesn't win because they have Pau Gasol or because they have Ricky Rubio. Spain wins as a team. So the mentality is completely different. You guys think, Ricky Rubio's not a huge player because he doesn't, make points. That's not his mentality. He plays for the team. Mm-hmm. So I always use that example of how different the mentalities is because it's individual gain against group gain. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's how we see it.
I think soccer, your football is probably closer to American sports because you always have a star in your soccer teams. And I'm not saying it isn't a team sport. It always is a team sport, but you have individuals that go. But I agree with you on basketball. It's why that year we lost in the Olympics. It was like we forgot about team ball. And that's what basketball is all about. And you guys, it's like you do the basics. You set picks, you do pick and rolls. It's like all the things that you learn in grade school that, and also look, things changed here. You had, as much as I liked Allen Iverson, he was all about him, and sort of, I think he started this sort of thing where the players were like, I want to be like AI and I want to be, it's about the individualism and being the star, to your point, and everything like that. And he was a great player, but he also broke down, his body broke down because I think if he played more of a team game, he wouldn't have had to take so much onto his shoulder and the wear and tear on his body. To me, he's one of the best point guards ever to play, but I couldn't agree more. It's like to your metaphor is that you guys are a team in Spain.
Yeah. That's what I loved about the Warriors. That Steve Kerr got in and said, we have amazing Stephen Curry, amazing blah, blah, blah. But it was like, no, move the ball. This is not, move the ball, move your ass. This is how we're going to win. And that's how the Warriors won so much because they played basketball.
Yeah, I agree. I cut to a bunch of comic book guys going, why are they talking about basketball?
No, because that's how this is how this show rolls. We will get to comics. They know that, but that's what our life experience is, what we love to do, what we love to, we love basketball, we love sports, etc. That's what shapes us as creators in the end, and this is, again, what you said about the mentality. I just remembered, and for people, I said, on the ad before this, I said, we want to talk about his connection with Spain, but for you, it was really weird to come home to, because you were here, you were sent home, and you decided to self-quarantine. And that was after 9 weeks without seeing your wife or your kids.
Yeah.
So you imagine, guys, how hard it was for him. He decided to self-quarantine after 9 weeks. I don't know if I would be able to do that, like just missing them as much as I know you love them, as I know you miss them.
I've been married for 21 years. My wife didn't mind. She's like, oh, the 2 weeks are up. You sure? I'm joking.
Yeah, but it was how hard it was for you to return home and having to stay away from them. After, again, it wasn't that he returned home after a week in Spain. It was like more than 2 months.
It was really interesting. My joke was that thank God for my daughter, else I would have starved to death because I had to have my food brought to me, and she would be the only one who would like, "Are you hungry? Do you need dinner?" I was like, "Thank you." And I literally, if I don't know if I could show you, but. Because I'm in the guest house I was staying at. So this is right outside of my house is below. And they would put the food at the door and, and wave to me and then like walk away. So for like 2 weeks, I luckily had a deck I can go sit on and rock in my rocking chairs and read and stuff so I could go outside. But, it was it was corner space. I mean, I was really lucky to have this space, but it's also my office when I'm home. So, able to, feel comfortable here. But to your point, honestly, I think about it now, I was sort of shell shocked because what you understand, I got a call from the studio in the middle of the night and said, pack your bags, you got to leave. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because, the news over there is different than the news here in America because everybody kept telling me it's so fear filled here in America. You know, CNN every 2 seconds is like, you know, breaking news story. You know, it's like, it's just sensationalized. Meanwhile, I'm there and I'm watching the BBC and I'm watching Al Jazeera, and I was like, I didn't even know anything was going on. Like, people, my friends would call me and be like, hey, how bad is it over there? And I was like, bad? Last night we were all out to dinner, you know, like it was just living in such a different situation. So when it hit, I think I was a little bit sort of, I was like, guys, everything's fine here. Now, by the way, as we realized, everything wasn't fine there.
Yeah, totally.
Dealt with it just like we did, much better, by the way. Congratulations to Spain, because you guys got your shit together and actually believe in science. Off a bit, you know. Mask? We don't need mask. I know better. I'm a high school dropout. I know what to do. So I got me and all my actors. Like, I joke, it was like, you know, my joke was like, it was like trying to get out of Vietnam in Hanoi, just first class. It was like literally like we're running through the airport, and it was pandemonium and it was insanity. This is after I had to go say goodbye to my beautiful and wonderful Spanish crew and Fresco Films, who was just amazing. And was amazing, and, you know, and say goodbye to people and them not knowing if we're ever going to come back, and a lot of tears and hugs, and then get on this plane, and then I got put through JFK. By the way, we come through JFK and we're like ready to get, like, you know, cavity searched, because everything we had been reading and heard, and we got there and no one was there. Like, we walked all through and we're all looking at each other like, no one's going to check us. We just, you know, like we just flew into it. Not a soul there.
Wow.
And then I was stuck at the airport, me and two of my commander, you know, like other people. I worked with the director, Amy Mann, and Chris Barber, my number two, and we were stuck at JFK for 5.5, 6 hours. What's even more amazing is we said goodbye to our actors, because a lot of them got off in New York. And, you know, and again, it was just hugs and kisses and I miss you and tears. And, you know, we all flew together. We all sat next to each other. There was 6 of us, and 3 of us, those 3 actors in New York, all got the coronavirus, and yet we didn't get it. And they all got sick within 2 days of getting home. So it's like bizarro land. And then, you know, and we were in JFK, which is like the hub of, like,
yeah,
you know, and then we got back here, and then, like you said, I self-quarantined, and knock on wood, you know, I've been tested. I don't have the antibodies. I've been twice, because I shoot commercials. I've done, you know, some testing for corona. I don't have corona. So again, it's crazy. How does some people get it? How does some people don't? My wife has the antibodies, which is crazy, because how did she have, she must have had it, and yet I didn't get it. You know, it's like, I don't know, man. There's so much we don't know about this.
Yeah, we don't know shit. Let's be honest. We don't know shit about it, you know. And when people says, oh, no, nothing is happening, I know, blah, blah, blah. They're like, guys, we just don't know. This is completely new. You know, many people, including myself, you know, when it started, really started, I was like, well, maybe it's just another kind of flu. But then, you know, when things happen, you just need to shut up, listen, and say, you know what? It wasn't that. We have no idea. Let's just be careful. You know, so I remember when you have to, you know, jump back, and I was like, whoa. And in like 2 days, the government said, we're closing. So I was like, you know what? Good thing that you left, because I guess the studios got a warning from the embassy or something like that. You know, Spanish government saying, we're going to close in a day, or we're going to close tomorrow, or whatever it was. Get your people out before.
We were on the last flight out. They told us on the plane, the last flight out of Madrid.
So probably they got a warning, you know, through the embassy for people to be able to get out right before they close. Yeah. But I'm glad you could go home. But
well, what's funny is when they first said to me, I said, I'll stay here. I'll write it out. Like, because I thought 3 weeks, 4 weeks, you know. And they always say to me, they always remind me, the great people at Netflix, who have been super about this, by the way, and been an unbelievable company to work for, and just the hindsight, and also took care of everybody, took care of the crew, paid them way over the time that anybody else had to pay them. They've just been amazing. They've been an amazing company, but they always remind me now, they're like, aren't you glad we made you get on that plane? Because you would have still be there, you know. It's like, so.
Well, Madrid will be waiting for you.
Yes, and the plan is to return still. They kept our sets, they kept our offices, like they're just. By the way, like most of Hollywood, it's, you know, really, we're all just biting at the bits to get back to work. and to film. And as the world, especially our business, becomes more international,
Absolutely.
We're so looking forward to getting back. But we also are very aware we don't want to bring disease. It's like we're not, this isn't, us coming and saying to the Indians, here's some blankets with some smallpox in it. We just want to keep sure that we're good neighbors, we're good friends, and that we, treat our international brothers and sisters with respect. So I think there's real consciousness of that.
Yeah, but just so you know, here when you get to the airport, the first thing is they do like 3 different tests. And then if, even with this, and then they take all your data. As I said, the tracking, take all your data, where are you going to be? And the moment something happens, they know where you are and send you home. But they also take your temperature, etc., etc. So people is not allowed in this because they had to open the borders, as you know, because the European Union said, we are going to open the borders. Spain wanted to open later, like mid-July. But the European Union said like 23rd of June or something like that. So Spain had to say, if the Union, we're Schengen territory, if the Union opens, we have to open too. So, Of course, they said, if we're going to open and we're going to risk the chance of, the virus coming again from outside, like it happened with Italy the first time, among other places, we need to control. So when people comes in, now there's in every airport, you have like 3 different checks before they let you enter the country. Which is as it should be everywhere, I guess. So why Spain for your show? Why Spain?
To be honest with you, Netflix kept speaking to me about Spain. You guys have a really good tax credit.
Let's be honest.
You're also a place that hasn't been shot like crazy, like there's not like 10 million shows, still some new stuff to be found. Like even when I got to Madrid, and mind you, my whole crew, everybody was from Spain. It was the only people that were not from Spain was me and the American actors, which was and the director. So there's like on the whole crew there's like 6 Americans, and everyone else was local Spanish crew. And the first thing I said to everybody is, let's write a love letter to Madrid. Like let's do the Madrid that you and I had this conversation. Like, what's the Madrid that you want to see? Because we Americans make every city look the same. It's like, and I'm like, by the way, there are a couple of movies in all fairness. Like, I thought the one of the Mission Impossibles, I remember seeing and thinking they did a good job of shooting Madrid, and I saw the little streets and saw a little bit of the cafes and stuff like that. You get a little taste here and there, but for the most part, it always seems like it could be any city in the world.
No, the best one on that, as I told you, is the Bourne. I don't remember if the second or third.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Mission Impossible 2. Don't talk to anybody about that one because they mix everything. Nothing made sense. It was absolutely horrible.
Well, they were all over the place. They were like a Bond movie, where they just leap from city to city. You don't know where you are half the time. But but my point overall is just, and that's what we were excited about. I mean, we had so many great locations, and Mario, who was my location manager, just would find these gems. And to that point, you can't find those things in America. You know what I'm saying? It was like a church from that's been around since the 14th century, or it was like we were finding these amazing, things in these locations. So you're bang for your buck, what you get location wise. And then as like your crews are great. You have some great crews. Not only was I sold on Spain, I'm just sold on the whole international experience. I feel like the next 5 years of my life is going to be shooting shows abroad. I just think that's going to be the way it is from here out.
It's the future, right? In a way, but everybody who thinks that it's only an American thing, they completely lost track of things.
Yeah. No, I think the whole future is internet, which is nice, right? I mean, it's interesting. I saw this documentary on silent movies, and everybody talks about when silent went to talkies and why all the silent stars were upset, and a lot of them think they were upset because they couldn't make the transition. And I actually saw this silent star whose name neither of us would ever know said, we finally had an international language in silent pantomime. We could all speak to each other, and we killed it with talk. Because then everybody started doing their own films in the English language and all that stuff. And it was like, so it just, it makes a lot of sense. It was like, back in the Sundays, I could make a movie. Charlie Chaplin traveled the world. Because everyone could understand what was happening.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm hoping in some weird way we're getting back to that. And I do think Netflix is leading that. They have a lot of international shows. And like even my aunt who's 75 is like, I watched this Russian show. I'm like, you did? She's like, yeah, it was really good. It's like, so it's opening the marketplace. And I think young people don't care where the content comes from as long as they're interested in it.
Exactly. Did you hear? Did I tell you a story about Bitter Daisies?
No.
That's a really small show created from in my state in Galicia by like the state public TV.
Okay.
Nobody watched it in Spain. Nobody. It was really small, and like Antena 3 and the other big networks didn't care. It was like, nah, we're not interested. So Netflix bought it for international release, and it's been the biggest show in Ireland and the United Kingdom for a year.
Wow, it's amazing.
Made in Galicia, and Money Heist, La Casa de Papel. I keep hearing that it's the biggest Netflix show all over the world, and it's an Spanish show.
I know.
So it's exactly what you say. There's no limits. People just want good stuff, right?
Why am I forgetting the name of it? The Korean movie that won the Oscar.
Parasite.
Yeah, I mean, it was unbelievable. And my kids, who usually couldn't sit through a foreign movie, just loved it. So, again, I think that it's just the melting away of sort of these, because of language, the boundaries that we put on ourselves. And I do think that these younger kids are going to grow up in a more international world. My children, your beautiful daughter, it's like they're going to just grow up in a more international world. And that's where the business is moving. And I can't wait. I'm excited because, if you're telling me I'll be in Spain, I'll be in Italy and things like that, I'd be thrilled to death.
Yeah. You've had a successful career in TV for a while now. Why comics? Why did you say I still want to do comics?
I grew up loving comic books, and everything's timing in life, right? Like if you were to ask me when I was in college or high school, what do you want to do? I would have said I want to write comic books, and TV and movies.
But wait, you froze.
Come to me till later in life. And when it came, I just was such a fan of comic books that I, took it. And it's crazy how it came to me. I was working on, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. You froze for a second, but you're fine now.
Okay. I was working, I was actually during the Writers Guild strike, I was walking on a line and I met a writer named Mike Benson, who had done Moon Knight and was doing Deadpools, and we just started talking about story, and we started talking about things in line, and he was like, wow, you know a lot about comic books, and I said, yeah, I mean, I grew up with them my whole life. And I said, I'd be, he's like, would you be interested in doing one with me? And I jumped at the chance. I think at the time I was 38 years old, it was, so we did a thing called Deadpool Suicide Kings that became a New York Times bestseller. And then, we did, I think we did after that Luke Cage Noir, which is one of my proudest books with Sean Martin Rural doing the art. I loved it. And then we did, which Deadpool? We did Deadpool Pulp, which was a lot of fun, so we had this thing. And then, eventually, and then what happened was actually I was at Comic-Con, and I was talking to Matt Keller, who is a guy that, I know through a mutual friend of mine, Stuart Schreck, who I've known since he's a little boy, who works for DC. My best friend is his cousin. And I've known Stuart since he's 12 years old. So, it's like, so from New York, back in New York. So I just went by the booth to say hi. And Matt's like, oh, I like that comic. And I've been reading your stuff and congratulations. And I'm a big Supernatural fan, which at the time I was an executive producer and I was writing. And I said, oh, I appreciate that. And he goes, why aren't you writing for us, for DC? And I said, I don't know anybody. I was not that guy who went to conventions and was like hawking my stuff and be like, hey, this, like that. I just didn't have the connections all my life. And he goes, well, Dan Didio, and at the time his girlfriend is now his wife. Leia, who's, as we both know, an amazing human being. Yeah. And they said they're huge Supernatural fans. And so he introduced me to them, and Dan said, call me Monday, and I did. And I started by just doing a JLA special, like annual. Yep.
Same
with all
one
the-
I did. My first writing for DC too.
Yeah, it was like, by the way, unbelievable, great amount of artists. And you know what's really interesting about that was like it was Dante's Inferno, right?
Yep.
The JLA. And who better to have than a bunch of Spanish and Italian artists who actually understand Dante's Inferno.
Absolutely.
Like, you bring that up to Americans, they're like, "What? What's Dante's Inferno?" And then from that, which is always a funny story, I did that. And by the way, I was really lucky up to that point because everything I had done was just praise. So I thought, oh, comic books are easy, man. Like I was like, everyone loves everything I'm doing. I'm like a rock star. I'm like, this is amazing. And I also think maybe because I was a little under the radar and the books I were doing weren't sort of, big books or people had their eyes on them. So I was getting a lot of love. And then I was asked, I'll never forget, I got a call from Dan. And well, two funny stories. And the first one is this: I got a call, actually not from Dan, from an old editor who I can't remember who it was right now, his name, but it was Eddie. Eddie called me and said, do you like Legion of Doom? I'm like, I love Legion of Doom. Like I grew up watching the Super Friends, and comic books were such a big part of my life. Like I just was a huge, and I grew up in the, as a kid, I started buying comic books in the mid 70s. I was born in 68. So like I was buying comic books off the rack. I remember when they were 20 cents, so, I just always loved Batman. I always loved Spider-Man. And I sort of grew up the same time comics were growing up, so I moved right into Marv Wolfman and George Perez's Teen Titans. And then, when I turned 18, 19, it's the English Invasion. So all of a sudden it's, Alan Moore and, and Neil Gaiman and like, so I just like, I felt really fortunate to, Garth, of course, had a big influence on me. And it was like, so I just grew up while comics grew up and everything like that. So I was super fortunate. So they said this thing like, would you be interested? And at the time, which was really even funnier, was Supernatural offices were in the DC offices. They were a few floors up from us. So they're like, great. So we're going to do this thing called Flashpoint. And they're like, and we're going to do a Doom mini. So they're like, can you meet with Jeff Johns in 2 hours? I was like, yeah, sure. Like, so I write up all this stuff. I have all these ideas, and I'll never forget. I go and I sit down with Jeff, who I did not know, and sat down with Jeff in his office and said, hey man, I was like, so, Black Mantra, I start giving all the things. He's like, yeah, none of them are in that. I'm like, what? And he's like, stories about Heatwave. And I'm like, Heatwave? Like from the Flash's, Rogues Gallery? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Like, I was like, I already accepted the job and said yes. And I'm like thinking in my head, like, oh boy, how am I going to do this? And I basically did a prison story. Like I made a prison movie, right? And one of the coolest things that I thought was cool as shit was I made Plastic Man a bad guy. And the way he gets into prison is someone mules him in. So he's like inside somebody, and like, so he has to like come out of them and like, and in the process kills the mule, and he's going to be the guy that gets Heatwave out. And I just was like, oh, this is the bomb, man. I just wrote the best story ever. It's probably the most hated Flashpoint story of all time. Like I thought my career was, I started reading the reviews and I was heartbroken. I was like, oh my God, people are like, this piece, it has nothing to do with anything. Who the fuck is Adam? I mean, it was like, just insanity. I was like, all the hate that came towards me. So I was like, oh my God. I'm like, well, that's it. That's the end of my comic book career. I'll never hear from, DC again. And then I'll never forget, it was Christmas. And I was taking my son actually to DJ's Universal Comics, which is our comic book shop here. Because my son also started to get into everything. And we're going there and I get a call and I pick it up and so it was a young lady and she said, Jim Lee and Dan Didio for you. And I said, yeah, right. And I hung up because I was pretty sure it was a buddy of mine who was messing with me. And I just went in and my phone rang again and again. And I wasn't picking it up because I was pretty sure it was a friend of mine, David. And finally I get an email and Dan's like, we're trying to call you. And I'm like, oh my God. So I called them back and look, like anybody, I can't help but be also Jim Lee. Oh my God. I grew up with his X-Men, and him and, Cliff Claremont. And like, I just, obviously idolized the guy. And all of a sudden I'm having the comic book nerd, thing. I'm like, oh my God, I'm on the phone with Jim Lee. And they said, we're going to do this thing. They didn't tell us at the time it was the New 52. They just said, hey, we're doing these launches. We want you to be one of the writers. We've really enjoyed working with you. And they basically, sent me a list. And I honestly didn't like anything on the list. Mind you, I had a full-time job, by the way. I was working on Supernatural, and I'm like, I'm going to take on a full comic book, like I had never done. Because, I liked minis. You were in and out. You did 4 books, you were done. You know what I'm saying? It was like, or 6, and you were done, So it was like I could dip in and dip out, but the idea of taking on a real book. And I remember saying to them, well, what's going on with Suicide Squad? And they're like, oh, it's funny. We're talking about it. And they said, why? And I was like, I just grew up loving John Ostrander and loving those books and, had a real affection for them. But I said, I have a caveat. I said, if I did it, I'd want Harley Quinn to star in it. And they were like, why? And I just said, I just think first of all, I can't believe she's never been in the Suicide Squad. And I said, secondly, I think it's a way to get her away from the Joker and sort of make her own person. I used to kept saying it's like Lauryn Hill's solo album from the Fugees. I was like, the emancipation. Actually, one of my books was called The Emancipation of Harley Quinn, which obviously they used in the title. And, I really was interested in her as a character. I always liked her, but I never liked the abusive relationship I felt she was in with the Joker. Absolutely. I always thought, like, I want to see her outside of the Joker. I want to see her, I grew up with seeing a lot of abusive women, and I just never been down with that. It was the one thing that I always had an issue with. And so they told me no. They were like, no way. They're like, we have plans for her. I'm like, okay. So I started, to be honest with you, I started to not be, I was like, and they had put me with an editor at the time with 2 guys. It was Pat McCallum and Mike Martz, who oversaw the whole, thing. And I just said, guys, I don't know, maybe I'm not the guy for the book and everything. And they're like, what's your big issue? I was like, you need an anchor here. And I feel like the anchor's Harley. And it took 3.5 months. And I got to give Pat and especially Mike Martz, who's a friend of ours, a lot of credit. They really fought for Harley, and we got her. And we were right. Like, she not just changed the Suicide Squad, but she drove sales of the book. And my joke always was, no one, was watching us. Me and Pat used to joke all the time. And by the way, Pat McCallum, who just left DC recently, he could be a gruff guy, but man, no one knows story better. He's like a really great story guy. And I've always just had a lot of love for him in the sense of his storytelling skills. And he was definitely my partner in crime in that. That book would not have been as good as it was if not for him. My joke is like, no one is watching you the first 7 books, right? So you just can write whatever you want and do whatever you want. And while a lot of the 52 books were going down, our sales were going up. And then they took notice. And, I never forget, Pat was like, all right, that's the end of the book. like now you're going to have 30 voices and everyone's going to weigh in and all that stuff. Cause we got noticed. But I will say the other interesting thing, which I know has been reported before, was what I didn't expect, is Jim had done a drawing for the first cover, or had done some art that I think was eventually drawn by another artist, and they released it about Harley. And she was more, Arkham Asylum Harley, like just skimpy outfits and, all this stuff. And again, just the amount of hate and anger online that sort of came after me. And then I would wake up to Facebook messages like, die, Adam Glass. I ever see you, I'll kill you. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, like these little Harlequin girls were just so furious that somebody had done something to the Harley Quinn. And I remember actually doing my first signing. I think I was in Long Beach, and I was signing, and a couple of Harlequins walked by and screamed, F Adam Glass. And like, I mean, it was literally like, wow. Like, I couldn't believe, like, and look, I know fans are passionate, and I know this and all that stuff, but it was just really interesting turn on me. But look, it's a long way to say that obviously changed everything for me. And that put me, I think, it took me, I'm like, I always joke, I'm never going to be as big as Jeff Johns or Scott Schneider, but it definitely at least put me on the map in a way that I wasn't just, I felt like I joke, I worked so hard to make it to the middle of the pack. So I did that for 2 years, and then I honestly walked away from it all because I wanted to do independent stuff. And then, I was really fortunate at the time. Mike Martz had gone to Aftershock, and him and Lee Kramer and Joe Pruitt, were just great guys, comic book guys. And, I had a nice little run there. I think I did like 4 or 5 different books for them. And I honestly thought I would never hear from DC again. Like I just thought like that was the experience I had, and that was it. And then, Pat McCallum had gotten, promoted up the line, and he said they were in a meeting about Teen Titans, and they were like, we really need a change here, and we need somebody who can come in and really, do something different. And someone said like Adam Glass did with Suicide Squad, and they called me. And the time I was doing a show called The Chi, and I was in the South Side of Chicago, and they called and said Teen Titans, which was probably the most important book to me as a kid. The Judas Contract like blew my mind. I was like so much a part of that, and I was such a fan of Marv's, that I and George, Perez's art. I remember saying to my wife, like, I don't really have the time for this or the bandwidth, but I have to do it. It's just a childhood dream. Mm-hmm. And then I did that. And quick true story about that is I remember sitting, I came back from shooting, and I had a meeting with Dan in his office, and I had this whole plan. I was going to do my Mary Marvel Dark Phoenix story, and Mary Marvel was the key to the whole book. Like she was like, because I always like, she's another character I just thought never been used the right way. Like there's a way to take, she's always been a sidekick character. I'm always interested in like, how do you take sidekick characters and like turn them into A-list characters? And like I did with Harley, I was hoping I can do that with Mary Marvel. And I was so excited. I went in and thought there's gonna be no problem. And they're like, can't use Mary Marvel. I'm like, what? Why can't I use Mary Marvel? And they're just like, literally like, they're like, oh, we have plans for her. And I'm like, are you kidding? I'm like, what plan? By the way, still, I've not seen one thing with Mary Marvel, by the way. All these years later, they never did anything with Mary Marvel. And I was just like so heartbroken because like I had it all in my head, a 2-year journey for Mary Marvel that would just changed her character within the DC universe. And like, so I was heartbroken. And then I'm sitting in the meeting and he goes, I said, she's my Harley Quinn. I need somebody. And he's like, create it, make somebody up and everything like that. And he's like, Dan, he's so just full of energy. And and he's like, come on, you're an idea. Yeah, exactly. You're an idea guy. You gotta have something. And I said, the only thing I ever thought of, Dan, when I was sort of putting the team together, I was like, what if Lobo had a daughter? I didn't even get daughter out of my mouth. Yes. Lobo has a daughter. And he's like, what's her name? And I'm like, Crush. That's it. I mean, within 3 days, I had sketches that he had artists doing. He got so excited about Lobo's daughter Crush, that it was like, that was it. And look, I mean, I think she was the breakout character and people really liked her and all that stuff. I think it's always hard to establish a character versus take a character that has, that's maybe woven into the sort of comic book lore and do something different with them. So, at the end of the day, it all worked out, and I was able to sort of do the book and take the journey that I wanted with Teen Titans, and did that for 2 years and wrote 28 books. And then in January, right before everything went nuts, was sort of my last book. And one could argue my timing was impeccable.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But I still want to see that Mary Marvel story. Probably was because, for a while they were waiting on Jeff's, Shazam book. And they were like, since we don't know what Jeff is going to do, let's not touch it. I guess that was the point. But
one quick thing about that. So for the longest time, I wanted to use Jakeem Thunder, and everybody always kept telling me, Jeff has it. And I finally got to use him in my last run on Teen Titans. And I brought him in because it's a character I always loved. And I called Jeff and I said, I don't know what happened, but I finally got him. Thank you. Just like I literally probably been asking to use Jakeem Thunder for 12 years.
And I can imagine Jeff like Jakeem Thunder.
Yeah.
Wow, I wasn't going to use him or something like that, which couldn't be surprised me to me at all. One thing, when you are, of course, are writing for comics or writing for TV, how do you need to change your frame of mind?
So,
storytelling.
Yeah. I feel like comic books are just smaller TV episodes.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a beginning, middle, and end. There's a cliffhanger. I love the cliffhanger. It's like a chapter or an act, in a thing. So in some weird ways, I feel like TV helped me write comic books, and it's just, like I always say, like even I do a lot of, I do advertising, I do commercials. I joke it's my side hustle. It's a couple of big commercials running in America now that I was part of. It's all storytelling. If it's 30 seconds, 20 pages, which is a typical comic book, 60 pages of a film script, 60 pages of a TV script, 120 pages of a movie. It's all just telling stories. And you just learn, I can tell them this big, I can tell them this big, I tell them that big, right? So, and I feel like, I always say people get mad at me. Like, I don't know, you have a little girl now. It's like, do you ever see Ratatouille?
Absolutely. Yes, he loves it.
Yeah, my kids love that movie too. When they were little, and it was like how he's like, everyone can cook, and all the chefs got really mad and everything like that. I always say everyone can write. It's just who has the discipline to write. Everyone has a story to tell. You have a story to tell. I have a story. The guy on the street has a story to tell. But you have the discipline to sit there and learn the craft to do it. And that's the difference between people who can make a professional living at it, and then, because as a writer, especially at family functions, everybody's like, I got a story for you. It's the greatest story in the world. And, you're going to make millions of dollars, and you're going to give me half, it's like, and I'm like, okay, here we go. You try to be a nice guy and hear them all, but all that stuff. So, comics really, and I had been reading them so long. I mean, I read religiously, I'd say till 7 years ago. So for 40 years, I religiously read comic books. And that's the other interesting thing. When I had a neighbor, I grew up in the Bronx. I had a neighbor, Eddie Pagan, who had lived upstairs, and Eddie had a comic book collection. And I was like 4.5, 5, and he was like 8 or 9. So of course I just looked up to him. The kid was sweet to me, probably like, what's this little kid? And because he read comics, and he had comics in his room that he would give me to read, and mostly Spider-Man back then, I wanted to read comics because, I wanted to be cool like Eddie. And so, my mom would take me to the candy store, which is where we used to get comic books back in the day, or the local, bodega, and they'd have them on the rack, and they started reading comics. So, having read comics that long, I felt like I had a good sense of, by the way, everything I've learned as a writer, my whole foundation is comic books. Like, even I remember when I started writing, I would use like a lot of, the BAM and WHAMs, and, like in my descriptions, I would use very similar to what I learned in comics, and people would be like, oh my God, you're so interesting. You're so original. And I'm like, I'm just stealing it from comic books, because nobody was reading comic books when I first got out here in the early 90s, like, so studios and executives, they didn't know, anything, but all my writing and my foundation and storytelling, and, I always say that I'll put, even though some of the movies maybe didn't live up to it, but, Dark Phoenix, Jean Grey story. I mean, it's like, those are classics. Those stories are, like, they're just epic. I always speak about one story, and I've said it in front of him on panels a million times. One of the stories that always stay with me my whole life is Marv Wolfman did a one-shot of Red Star and Teen Titans. And it's like, it's such a beautiful story. And I don't remember what issue it is, though he remembers it every time. And he actually really appreciates that I bring it up because it was one of his favorites, but it stood with me so long. So basically the story is this woman from Russia is a walking, basically, do you remember the story that I'm about to say? Is a walking, like...
You have to think that Teen Titans is my favorite series ever. And the original Who is Donna Troy, the issue where, Dick Grayson finds out about everything, is my favorite comic book ever. So in New Teen Titans lore, I think we are the same here, my friend.
Yeah, but that story is she's a walking biological time bomb, and the Titans are trying to stop Red Star because Red Star is trying to kill her, and he eventually succeeds, takes on the Teen Titans, but he succeeds, and at the end you find out it was his fiance, and that he, like, basically was trying to save America and the world, even though he loved her, from basically, something bad. And it was like heartbreaking. And I remember that story always stood with me. And I mean, it's just great storytelling. And he did that in a comic book. He did that in 20, back then, 24 pages, but, still, that's just, I hold that. I actually have the book somewhere. I've given it to other people to read. I'm like, you want, like, anytime somebody's like, oh, comic books, just superheroes and capes. And I'm like, here, read this, bang, read Neil Gaiman, like, read, like these, this is high art.
Absolutely. Let me see. Angel Perez asks, Mr. Glass, when you write the script, how do you work with the artists that you're working at that moment? Do you talk to them before and try to leave so free space for them, to give some of them in the storytelling, or do you give very detailed scripts and he says, the Alan Moore classical school.
Yeah, I think you know this, right? You have different relationships with different artists. I was really lucky on Suicide Squad. Fernando was amazing. I got to work with him. We had a real connection. Sometimes you have a connection with artists, and sometimes, look, we're in a business where the artists are actually the rock stars, and I feel like some of them are really open to that collaboration. And I think some of them just do their thing and like, here it is, you're welcome, So I've had both. I really lucky. I had an unbelievable connection with Bernard Chang. I mean, that guy's a brother for life. Like, I just love him to death. Unbelievable human being, unbelievable artist. We were inseparable from jump. We shared, we spoke. I had the same kind of relationship with Pat Olive on Rough Riders. Unbelievable human being, unbelievable artist, great things. Then I've had a ton of people that just, again, like I said, there wasn't that connection. So every book's different, I like to give the artist enough room to do what they have to do. There's certain things I want, but then I say, oh, hey, these pages are yours, man. Like, I'll write note to artists, make this better. Like, just, but then there are things like, I know I want this shot for this or that. And, I'll put that in, I'll say, please, and this one, can you try this and everything like that. So a lot of it goes in the writing and the descriptions or, anything like that. And then there's just certain people, like, again, Bernard and I are counterparts. We're the same age, we grew up reading the same book. So I could make a reference to him and say, think of, Wolverine when he was, and he got it right away. It was like, okay, you know what I'm saying? So it depends. It depends who you're working with and which book. By the way, and I'll say this, and I'm not going to name names. There are artists I'll never work with again, because they didn't care or follow, and I felt like the book suffered because of that. Yeah,
you mentioned before Marv, of course. So in terms of creative influences, people who you grew up reading that always stood with you, not as a direct influence on the way you write, because that's different, but that's in the back of your head, that how to portray emotion, which is, I think, Marv's biggest forte for me. He can do everything, but I've never seen somebody being as, in my opinion, as emotions rang true when Marv Wolfman wrote them. You know what I mean? Everything seemed real. What are your influences in that sense? That writing you've always had in the back of your head when you were growing up, and that you're still keeping now.
Yeah, and obviously, look, you start with it. I think it ends and begins with me with Marv Wolfman. I read his Dracula series. Like, I just didn't. And by the way, I wasn't even putting everything together like that. It was the same guy until I was older and I realized this thing. And I've told, Marv has become a friend. I told him this, like, I think it was 1981 or 82 or 83. And I remember my Russian Jewish bubby, who, must have been in her 70s at the time. She raised me with my mom. Taking me to the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City to stand in this line to get, Marv to sign one of my books. And, this back people and I always say this, like, what I'm blown away by Comic-Con, because I remember when it was a room in a hotel, and it was like a bunch of boxes and one guy was maybe selling a t-shirt or two, and like to see it go from that, to what it all is now, it just blows me away. But listen, I'm sort of a 70s, 80s, sort of kid. So Denny O'Neil, who just passed away, the great Denny O'Neil, like just, had a huge, huge influence on me. I read most of his books and most of his runs and everything like that. And the others, Neal Adams, Neal Adams had a giant influence on me. And I know you and I've had this conversation before. When I go to a Comic-Con and I see Neal Adams sitting there all by himself and nobody talking to him and no line and no nothing, and he's out there still pushing stuff, my heart breaks, because this guy changed our business. Unbelievable. We're not very kind to the people that, and Neal fought for so many people and he did so many things also, the advocate that he was. But, again, just, those guys are also, especially Neal, dealing with, social issues, on his runs, and keeping sure that he was talking about race and he was talking about politics, and all that stuff. And as we said earlier, John Ostrander is of a different cut, but still John was important, and the things that John did, really, really had a big influence on me. So, I my hat off to, all those people. And then there are people, even, their counterparts now that I respect, and for different reasons. Everybody does things, there are certain things that you see, what we as writers call the tricks, but and I don't mean a trick in a bad way, but I mean, like I could tell a Scott Schneider opening of a book in 2 seconds, because Scott loves history. It's like he'll talk about the deep sort of things of Gotham, and this building was built, and thing like that. I love that stuff. So my hats are always off to, like, Scott and the work he's doing, and Jeff too. Jeff's great with character and sort of like, getting into the, I remember Jeff was an assistant for Dick Donner, and I would sit and talk to him about comic books. We were both comic book nerds, Gail Simone, Gail's great at what she does, and she can turn around and, flip a character on its head and, turn it. So there are a lot of people right now that are writing comics that I also can't help but look at and, sort of be influenced by. And again, the whole English invasion just blew my mind. I felt like, I always talk about this, like, this is not maybe a message for the kids at home, but, like it's interesting, if you've ever done any hallucinogens when you were younger, it's like it opens the doors of perception. I'm not saying you should do them a million times a day, but it's the kind of experience you have. And you come back, and I think it's, if you're especially an intellect of some sort, you realize that, okay, there's different ways and things. And I'm glad I had that journey. I feel that way about, like, the English invasion. I feel that about Alan Moore, and I feel that about Neil Gaiman. And I feel like that when I started reading that stuff, that shit blew my mind. Miracle Man, the greatest non-Shazam story ever, is, right? You guys called it something different in Europe. We called it, I think it was renamed.
It's Miracle Man, yeah.
It is Miracle Man by you, okay, too.
It was originally Marble Man, but Marvel should. That's why Alan said never work with these guys again. And then it's Miracle Man, and it stayed that way, yeah.
Yeah, but all those books just, again, had such an influence on me. And I'm a Garth Ennis fan too. I always liked Garth. He's a little more blue collar, but I remember when Preacher came out, and and The Boys, and all that stuff. I always enjoyed that stuff too. But again, it's like, those guys changed the business and the way we looked at the book. And again, I think took it to a high, high art. And look, there are people I think that go underappreciated too, that came from that thing. I think Paul Jenkins is a good writer, and I feel like he did a lot of great work. People don't know him as well, but definitely did some great stuff, especially early on in his career. What's his name? Who doesn't know? Who's also from that group? Robinson. Is it James Robinson? James Robinson,
yes, Starman, yeah.
James Starman was awesome, man. Like, James a good writer, man. Like, I just, like, there's just so many guys that, like, I read and I was just so influenced by, and both in the past and now.
It's fun because I have Marv. I needed to have Marv, at the beginning. I think he was like second or third, and we were talking about Tomb of Dracula, and he was like, people doesn't realize I didn't know how to write them. I was learning from Gene. Everything I was doing, everything that I could, do a plot, because of course it was Marvel style. And what Gene sent me back, that's what made me learn. Everything I learned later was because of Gene. That's because Gene sent me stuff back, and I could look at the pages and I was like, oh, so from my plot, he did this, he made it so much better. So now I can add the dialogue, but like the way I learned to do, full script was by the plot, because the amazing artist, teach me how to do it.
Told me the same thing. Yeah, he said George would send him stuff, and then he'd write the dialogue.
Yes. The key learned the right way. It was just like when you have an amazing artist that you're this close with, you just have to let it shine, and the artist is going to go back to you, and he's going to make you shine too. It's a symbiotic relationship, right?
It's like musicians. I say, like, I always felt like Bernard, like we were always jamming, Yeah,
absolutely. And also about Neal, what you just said, Neal Adams, just reminded me of how many people doesn't remember how he fought for Siegel and Schuster to have their name. How many people doesn't remember how much he fought for the artist to get the original art back?
Yeah.
You know, people doesn't remember how much he fought for all of us now. You know, for the artists, for creators' rights, for the names to be on the books, for for the family to get some money out of our creation, and that's really sad. Because what people remember now is that they go to his booth and of course they see, oh, he's charging $200 for a signature, whatever. Nah, but then I tell them he's earned it. He's earned his right to charge whatever the fuck he wants. This guy, if it wasn't for him, most artists wouldn't get their art back, and the Siegel and Schuster wouldn't be in the credits, etc., etc., etc. So whether you like that or not, the guy has deserved whatever he wants. He earns the respect.
He has mine every time I go, and I've said it to my son a million times, who, especially when he was little, I would always point to Neal, and we'd always go over and say hi, and I don't know him well, but I always just would say, thank you, I did that, you had a big influence on me, thank you, what you did for people, all that stuff, and, he always appreciated it and stuff like that. But listen, I say this all the time, and we know in our business, there are people who don't have the best reputations, but there are people who also do a lot behind the scenes for other artists and writers and fight the good fight.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, I respect that more. You don't have to be the most personable person in the world, but
mm-hmm.
if at the end of the day you're helping your fellow artists and writers and trying to make that better, you got me all the way.
Yeah. What do you think needs to change in comics so we can get this is trying, we know, blah blah blah. We need a wider audience, and I've always said, and I repeat it, I think it's the distribution. The problem is the distribution. But what do you think it needs to change personally?
A few things, and I'll start with something that I know people are going to say it's going to be a little unpopular. I've had my say. I'm a 52-year-old white dude. I've gone out there, and that doesn't mean that I don't have stories to tell. That doesn't mean that I can't help mentor younger writers. We need new voices, and we need all types of voices. We need more diverse voices. We need more women. We desperately need more women. It's
Absolutely.
a business. It's a business that, if I hear one more time somebody tell me, oh, there's no women artists, and no, I go and I walk Artist Row. I see a ton of women artists. Well, they're not getting the shots and chances.
There you go.
Like that, and we have to mentor those people, and we have to bring them up, because certain stories, like I do want to see, I've now a couple of times have done this, and I'm not trying to be a martyr or get up and be a social warrior justice. I'm just saying that at the end of the day, if I can use my platform in any way to help people, especially good storytellers, in TV, I always say I play Moneyball, which is I'm trying to find people that are undervalued that I
Mm-hmm.
believe in. So like my last writer's room, we had 6 writers, and I was one of them. So I actually hired 5 writers. 4 were women and 1 was a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I found them all over. I found a young lady from Sicily. I found a young woman from Russia. I had a Latino writer. I had an Afro-American writer. And these women, but they were writers to me at the end of the day. And they were just fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And I had known a girl from New York that I had met in Singapore who was a writer. I got her first job. And so I knew she loved graphic novels. She kept telling me about all the rejection she was getting. And I said, you know what? Let's do a book together. And I said, the goal is to do it together. And then after you do this book with me, it'll launch you. And then you could use this as a platform to go. And her name's Olivia Crato Briggs, and super talented writer. And, we did Mary Shelley together.
Mm-hmm.
And we're about to do another book together. But then Aftershock gave her own book after that. I'm about to do something with a Russian female writer that we're about to do next. So, one of the things I'm trying to do is put my money where my mouth is, which is it's one thing to say, we got to change this, we got to do this, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's and then it's another thing doing it. But on even those books, we were trying to find female writers because we were trying to tell this feminist story about Mary Shelley. And now what I will say in all fairness to Aftershock is the ones that are good and have proven themselves are busy, because, there's not that many of them. So they're out there. So we got to change that. And then, we got to take some chances with the storytelling. I'm not saying that we have to, I always say, what's the familiar but fresh idea? Like, definitely there are things when you pitch me and it's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think what would be a bad example. It's like, Batman's on Mars. I'm like, yeah, that might be a little too far for me. But, at the end of the day, we have to push the boundaries and we have to find, ways to sort of, you and I are already in. We're going to read comics. We love comic books. But the younger generation doesn't give a shit. Like, and by the way, I see it with my son. It's not that they're not fans. They actually, in some ways, know more about the characters than we do, but they're getting it from different places. They're getting it from TV shows. They're getting it from video games. They're getting it from, all these other different sorts. They're not reading the books like we read books. So my son's a little different because I got a million comic books laying around the house. So he's, always picking up and taking a look at them. But like his knowledge is unbelievable, but 95% of that is coming from a different source. So if you want to get back to the kids reading comics, then you better speak to them. I was trying to do that with Teen Titans. I was trying to put it through the perspective. I had 2 teenagers at home and I was trying to say, okay, well, how do I make this about now? My team was very diverse. That was, I wanted that from the beginning. My team has many girls as they had boys. It was like I was trying to really strike a balance because I also look at my children's peer group and friends groups, and that's what they look like. And I would try to take conversations I heard them having and try to put it into the books, and they're on their phones a lot because kids are on their phones a lot now, and all those things. So, I think it's a mixture of things, but at the end of the day, we need to learn, especially the more established guys, we need to learn to be mentors and really sort of, use what we have in our career and our platform. Like I'd like to see more established writers, sort of take on some partners, not for every project, but say, hey, here, I believe in this writer. Let's go do a book together, because those people, and that's how they're going to get their breaks. And that's how they're going to get in, indirectly. Mike Benson did that for me, asking me to come write a book with him.
Yeah.
So, pay it forward.
Yeah. And also, I think, I've always said, and the Spanish market has proven it very much, it's not that the readers aren't there. It's not, by the end of the day, it's that we don't give them what they want. You know what I mean? Here in Spain, suddenly a big market has grown in the last 5-6 years because some creators said, I'm just going to do what I want to do. I'm not going to try to do French comics or, I am not going to try to do American comics. I'm just going to do a slice of life, horror, whatever is what's my thing. And a huge market has grown out of that. And I keep saying, when they tell me there's not a big audience for comics or there's no female readership, I go back and say, you know what? Raina Telgemeire's books sell a million copies each. The market is there. The readers are there. You are just not giving them what they want to read. So in a way, I think it's not only what you said, and we will discuss about the distribution. It's also, as you just said, the established guys like yourself or Neil Gaiman or any of the others. Neil is a separate world. It's a separate universe right now. But you know what I mean? I always say, if we want to expand the readership, we cannot only say, let the distribution do it. Let's distribute it better. Like, guys, you have the name. You can take the chance, As Libermejo was amazing, he said, when we were discussing here, like, until COVID happened, you saw the hill. And it was like, well, maybe I'm not going to jump because I don't know if there's a precipice, and how big the fall is going to be. But after COVID, I think most of us as creators should think, if we don't make the jump now, when are we going to do it? It's like the hill looks more attractive by every day. And that's what I'm telling a lot of creators in this chat. Like, if we don't make the jump now and think about the readership that is there waiting for us, especially at this time when people is confined at home, when are we going to do it?
Well, it's the age-old thing, right? It's commerce meets, it's like people are afraid of the steady check. They're not getting that. They're taking the responsibility thing. And I traded. Look, I'm blessed because this has always been a side hustle for me, which has both been good and bad. Because look, I've shared this story. I've shared this with you before. I don't ever feel like I've been accepted by the community because I'm a Hollywood guy, So I always feel like you're great, Mike Mart's great, but I'm saying other comic book creators. I think certain journalists who, I could write the greatest story ever. Doesn't matter. I'm not a true comic book guy. I'm not Jeff Lemire. I'm not, I didn't come up, through the sort of comic book world. So, it's so for me, it's
which, by the way, is absolutely stupid. A good story is a good story.
I agree. You're not going to get an argument.
I don't care where you came from. Is the story good? I like it. Fuck off. I like the story.
One day, just if you want to have fun, because I know you have all this free time with your career and your kid and marriage, look up reviews of mine and see how many of them start with Hollywood writer Adam Glass.
I know.
It's like, it doesn't matter that I've written 150 comic books and I've been reading them for 40 years. I will always, in their eyes, be a Hollywood guy. But my point to that is, I do understand. And by the way, that's actually another interesting thing, but I'm trying to sort of get back to what you were saying. And I understand it. There are a lot of people who looked at me as I'm taking money out of their pocket, this is my career. This is my job. You're just this is your hobby. And I totally get that. It's like that. But it gets back to what you're saying is like, it's already tough enough to make a living, and I have a lot of friends and the same people, and it's scary for them to take that leap because they're worried, how do I pay the rent? How do I do this? But to your point, if you do it now and you take the hit now, what you'll be is both creatively and financially more rewarded down the line.
Yeah.
And you will not only make the money, but you will be free of the restraints of, maybe being, as we know, as much as a lot of us work for DC and Marvel and like it, there are restraints working for DC and Marvel, I mean, I can tell you, I'd have a story in Suicide Squad and everybody approved it. And a week before, it's supposed to go to print, I get a call and be like, hey, so in Action Comics, they're doing a similar story. You got to change your story. You're like, what? And they're like, yeah. And so you're like all of a sudden rushing to, thing, or, you're asked, you're in the middle of a run and you've got, a story arc going and they're like, hey, so then, next 2 books have to be a crossover. And you're like, but that screws up my whole story that I've been setting up for, and they're like, yeah, it's the whole company's doing it. Next thing you know, you're, so, then the fans, they don't know that. So the fans are like, Adam Glass dropped the story and didn't finish the story, or the story now makes no sense. And you're like, oh, if you only knew what happened behind the scenes. There was really funny. I'm still getting, and it's just recently, and I had it on my Instagram. A couple of people hit me up. I'm getting a lot of shit lately for Damian, and everybody loves Tomasi's run with Damian and Little Superboy and everything like that. And they're like, you turned him into a killer. And I'm like, I turned him into a killer. He's been a killer from the beginning. The things that you get blamed for are just hilarious. And I also reminded them that the last 3 books I have nothing to do with, right? So it's now Robbie, another great writer and a good friend of mine. But it's like, it's just so funny. The fans, and look, the other part of it I always tell people is they're passionate, which is good. They love books, and they obviously speaks personally to them. So, it's always hard to sort of, I always try to think about that. I'm like, they're upset, but they're dialed in and there's something emotional that makes them really care for this character. And so, I always sort of take it with a grain of salt and try to understand that it's not as much me as just their love for the character.
Yeah. And also, going back to what you just mentioned, in terms of the growth of the industry and all that, we keep going back to the same mantras, to the same pool. But in a way, when you talk about, the readership and the risks to get that readership, I always think the same. If you don't play it, if you don't try it, you are going back to the old mantra again in comics, which is short-term thinking.
Yeah.
And Dan has been, very open about this afterwards, after leaving DC and all that. Like, you always told me about the short-term thinking, and yes, you were absolutely right. But you know how it works. I know how it works. I know the machine has to keep cranking. I know monthlies have to be coming out. But also, I think part of what's happening is that while you devote 99% of your time to the monthly, you guys should be 90% and then 10% have a team of saying, stop thinking about now, think about 5 years, think about 10 years. As I always say, the Apple model. You have, you have to have the iPhone. The iPhone 12 has got to be ready in September. But
Yeah.
I know Tim Cook, and before him, Steve Jobs, has a team in the back that is all only thinking about what is the world going to be in 10 years. What are we going to need in 10 years? And stop thinking. Don't think about now at all. If I get you thinking about now, you're fired. We need to think about the future, and I think comics don't think about the future.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And by the way, especially like DC, they're just, you got the Warner Brothers. They're dealing with such a big, giant corporation that's trying to protect these brands. As we all know, a lot of the issue with the Dan of it all, who was trying to do what you're saying. I think he was trying to move things forward, was trying to think of the future, and look what happened. I mean, it's like, they got scared, at the end of the day, because they make dolls and movies. And that's the other thing. Like, I was trying to explain this to somebody. I think it wasn't my daughter, was it? Maybe. It's also really confusing out there. How does the Joker movie and the Harley Quinn movie exist in the same world? They don't. They tell you they don't, because the tone, by the way, is so different, and and so just it's confusing. There's so much going on out there, and it's all over the place. So that's the other problem I think that DC has, which is like, and one could argue, hey, we've got a Batman for everybody, but at the same time, it's like, there's going to be a movie now, and there's going to be a TV show, and they're not necessarily in the same worlds. And, then you have all the CW shows, and there's 2 Flashes. I mean, it's
you have the Flash TV show, and then you have the Flash movie, and you're like, that's
I can't get my head on straight, man. It's like, and I know what the fuck's going on. So what about somebody who's like just a Joe Schmo walking down the street? Like, try explaining all this. It's just gotten so confusing. It's almost like what Marv did after Crisis. He was like, I'm going to make it all one world.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm saying? Like, I'm going to take the third, and I know we've now changed that again back to Earth X and 37. And by the way, you talk about influences. I mean, I was a huge JLA, JSA guy. Like, I love those Thanksgiving issues where they would cross over and they would, see each other. And I loved All-Star Squadron, which is, World War II. Like, I just, I loved all that stuff. And, I always joke, like, it got me interested in history.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing, like when I was writing Rough Riders, like all that stuff was incredibly researched. Like, I always kept saying, everything is real except the alien invasion. Like, that is who Teddy Roosevelt was. That is who Houdini was. That who was Jack Johnson was. Like, I was like, like, I knew that every one of these people were, you want to bring the cat? come say hi to Dave Macho. I'm actually talking to Dave Macho, and we're having an interview that we're now on YouTube Live. Oh, goodness. Here, let me see this. You got to see here, America and Spain and the world. Mm-hmm. This is... Yeah. So he's a big comic book fan. So yeah, those were super, super heavy, influences on me. And I actually think, again, back to, we were talking about writers that influence you. I thought James Robinson had us also a great run on that. Like, I loved what he was doing with the JSA and stuff like that. I thought that was all interesting. And look Jeff's doing on Stargirl. He's like keeping those characters alive and keeping them and coming. I mean, you talk about something, he's doing that. He's making familiar but fresh. He's taking those characters, and Dr. Midnight's now a young, African-American girl, and like just making those legends living on. Like, I think Jeff's doing a great job of, doing what exactly we're saying, giving it to a youth market and saying, here are these characters for you.
Yeah. And James is working on Stargirl with Jeff was telling me he was really happy, and when he could call James, with the TV show approved, it's like, I want you to do it. And James was like, what? Because you started the JSA thing. I need you, to be able to stay true to the characters, which is amazing. I think that's one of the best things about Stargirl, that it stays, fresh, as you said, but at the same time, it always rings true to the classic JSA, the fans knew.
Yeah, and listen, I was talking about this a little bit earlier, and we were talking about, there's so many people that, people don't know what certain people do behind the scenes and what they do. And you just hit on a perfect thing, Jeff went and he did. He kept sure he took care of James. James, it's hard to make a living as a comic book writer. He brought James on because James is a good writer. Mm-hmm. And James kicked ass on that show, and he did a great job. And I also know, much like what Neal Adams did, Jeff, has done that for comic book people too. He kept short, I remember I got invited to the Suicide Squad premiere, as did Austrian and all that, because Jeff was like, hey, we got to invite the people that help build these books, and he's always reminded the corporations that the artists and the writers are important, I know this is regressing a little bit, but it reminded me of a story. And again, so me and Bernard Chang were doing a signing with another writer, and because this gets back to your artist writer question, and I just thought of it now, so I'm sorry to jump all over the place.
No, it's perfect.
But as I remember it, and I remember we did a signing, and I had talked to the other writer, and at the end, and the writer didn't really, and Bernard didn't talk that much, and it wasn't like they didn't like each other, just didn't have much of a conversation. And so afterwards, me and Bernard went to lunch, and I said, remind me again, like the books you did and everything. And he told me all the books that he had done in the last. I knew a couple, but I didn't know a couple of others. And he told me the book, and I said, wait, didn't the writer write that? He's like, yeah, I did the book with him for 2 years. And I was like, you guys didn't even talk. He goes, that was our whole relationship during. So him and Bernard for 2 years didn't have one conversation about this thing. So, it goes the other way too. So not just to put it on the artist.
No, absolutely. When I talk about symbiosis, it's gotta be both ways. It's always there can always be a part which is the artist or the writer who just doesn't want to have a relationship. And also in that case, guys, we'll probably have Bernard sooner or later here. When you know Bernard, you're going to see it's very difficult to not have a relationship and talk to him, especially about basketball. For like hours and hours and days and days.
And he's a Miami Heat fan, so it's really hard to talk to him about basketball.
That's also true. But you can always switch to car engines, and he will talk about car engines too. So whatever.
I've seen Bernard do this more than once, which is amazing. I've seen it on signings. I've seen it, I've asked him once to do me a favor like this. Bernard will sit with a young person for an hour. Of his time and sit there and show him how to draw or look at his art and talk to them. And how many people don't do that? I mean, he's just an unbelievably great human being.
Yeah, the year that a couple of years ago, I think it was, when I invited you to Dutch Comic Con and you couldn't do it, and Bernard came, that happened. A small kid, playing with his art. He wasn't ready at all. Like just a small kid. But I knew, he asked me, one of the guys, the con director or somebody like that, or HR, just came to me a press, and they said, hey, can he talk to somebody, one of your comic guests? He's a young guy. He won like a raffle or something like that. We just introduced him to one of the actors, and we want to see if he wants to talk to one of the comic artists because he wants to learn to be an artist. And I literally didn't look at anybody else. I just said, give me a second. So I went to Bernard and said, hey, I know you're busy doing a commission, but this kid, and he didn't even let me finish the phrase. He was like, absolutely, bring him to me. And he spent, I think, like an hour and a half or something like that. So I have to stop him because he had a panel. But we literally did to the kid, you know what? He's going to a panel now. Why don't you walk with us? And the kid was like, I can walk with you to the panel. Yeah, just come in and sit in the first row, and we'll keep talking. And if you have any more questions, he'll answer to you. And that was beautiful. That was beautiful.
And you're hitting on something which is like, and look, every business has this. Hollywood comic books. I mean, there's been some horrible things in the news, and I feel terrible for those victims and people. But there's also the other side of the business. People like Bernard, that I see, the kindness, that also happens in the business that doesn't get reported and people don't talk about because it's human nature. It's nice things to do. So it's like I actually wish there were more Bernard Changs in the world because absolutely.
And I think something that is not reported, and you fans should remember. And I always tell you, this is the reason I created this channel, is so the human side of the creators, and I'm included. It's also the respect they have, not for the characters only, but for their fans above that. Because you think you love comics, and you do, but they live with comics every hour or every day. Imagine how much you have to love them, and also how generous they are with their time. How generous they are with their time, with their effort, with how much they talk to the fans. They love to talk to you. They love to just give you time, and give every time they talk to you about the art. Maybe you don't realize it, but respect this. They give you a piece of their soul
I agree.
because it's
Yeah.
what they do, and this is what they love to do. So that's why I always ask you. If a creator has a bad day, or tells you he's tired to do a signing, and come back later, come back tomorrow. When you get angry, I always tell you this is disrespectful, and you get angry at me, and I don't care because it is. This guy has been there for hours. And if he says
Yeah.
no, it's not because he doesn't like you, doesn't want to do it. It's that because he's fucking exhausted.
Yeah.
And you gotta
And
understand.
I know it's not like, it's not physical labor, but it's mentally draining,
No, it's also physical because if you're in a table, doing commissions, whatever, in an artist alley for like what,
Touch
8
labor.
hours?
Yeah.
8 hours?
And then people realize is they go back to their hotel room and work more. Because
Exactly.
listen, some of them, that's how they make their living. That's how they make up the extra money that they need, because they might not even get paid enough as an artist.
Yeah.
Either not, or don't have enough, because they're limited how many books they can do. You know what I'm saying? Writers can do multiple books, but artists can only draw so many.
Yeah.
So it's like I couldn't agree more.
And also what you just said, when they're not doing a commission on that table, what are they doing? Are they scratching the balls? No, they get the comic page that they have to do and deliver, the next week. They get the page and they start drawing the page. You are not going to see them idle. I have a question here. La Atlántida de Ceita. That's a good name. Hi, Adam. Thanks for your great work in DC, and I love your Suicide Squad. What is your opinion about the funny character for him, King Shark?
Oh, I love King Shark. I had a whole thing where King Shark ate one of the guys on Suicide Squad that I created, who, oh my God, I can't remember his name right now, and then regurgitated him. But listen, I always thought, it's interesting. I think a little of him goes a long way. To me, he's like, the great, comedic supporting character that, you give enough to. But, that it's funny because I ran out of time. I try to sort of get deeper in and sort of explore him a little bit because, I'm interested in what made a shark man and how did that come about, and sort of how do you, like, are you man, are you shark? Are you both? Is the man somewhere inside there, lost, and he's trying to get out, and all these different things, because he's, for a better term of the word, he's a monster, a mutant, call it whatever, but he's a true monster in the sort of Frankenstein sense. So great character. I think all of us could do more. I know even, I think Gail tried to do some stuff with him that I remember being really interesting. I think she probably got it better than most. But, I think it's a character that has a lot of way to go and a lot of room to keep not only telling stories, but learn more about.
Stupid question. When I read, at least for me, maybe you're going to correct me. When you were doing Suicide Squad and I was reading King Shark, for me, I kept thinking he was your changeling. In a way, the changeling was the comedic, but at the same time, really bad childhood, consider himself a monster or a joke, blah blah blah. And when I was reading when I was seeing King Shark, I couldn't stop thinking, this is Adam's changeling.
Yeah, in some ways, absolutely. I mean, I think changeling is much more funny, and it can, for a better term of the word, I mean, think about it. King Shark can't walk down the street. You know what I'm saying? It's like, he's a guy who, is he can't hide who he is.
Mm-hmm.
He's, so he's somebody who has to live with this his whole life, and sort of like, you never get time to tell these stories, but like, if they had a day off, like they couldn't because they were all in prison, but
mm-hmm.
Like everybody else can go live a somewhat normal life, and he would still be stuck in his tank or cell or something like that. So for him, I think it's a lot deeper. But yes, he was always someplace I can go to. It's really crazy, and Pat McCallum pointed this out about him. Like, there was a thing about him, like we once put a line in, and I forget the exact line, but it was almost like a wrestler. Like, he said something and people just loved that line. And it was like, Pat's like, in some ways you should just think of him like Hulk Hogan or a professional wrestler, and everything like that. And he was right. People just would, anytime I would put a line in like there's, meat, and screaming, or something like that, and rip somebody apart. People are like, oh my God, that was the best page ever when he ripped the guy and he screamed meat, it's like, in some ways I felt like the fans wanted him more simple and savage, and I was much more interested in trying to go into a more complex place with him. But at least from what people were reacting to, it didn't seem like they wanted to do that. Keep them simple more, and
And same guy asked, well, I think you answered this question already. Why did you decide to include Harley Quinn in Suicide Squad? Nowadays, Harley is an essential character in this group. Thank you for making her so essential to DC.
Well, I appreciate that because, again, it's one of those things like, as time goes on, we're talking about Neal Adams, and I am in no way even in the same, league as Neal Adams, but you get forgotten. Like I feel like, Jimmy and Amanda came and they did a good job and they did what they did. And it's not a knock on them, but it was like, I see them getting credit for a lot of things that I did, and, I made her independent first. I was the one who, turned around and not only just put her in the Suicide Squad, but got her away from Joker, and I got her away, and sort of who she was. And by the way, even before me, Paul and them Dini were, had her having relationships with Ivy. So, I built on their shoulders.
Yeah.
People built off my shoulders, but along the line, you sort of get forgotten. I read articles all the time, and, it's like, and maybe because it was more, and this is, again, not a knock on Jimmy and Amanda, who I think, did a great job and are good people. But I think, because it was the latest thing, I see them getting a lot of credit for those things, especially as the movies were coming out and all that stuff. But again, I always just thought this was a character, and I watched the original Batman animated series, which I love. It's one of my favorite ever. But I got to be honest, I was always uncomfortable with the violence he had towards her.
Yeah.
It was the one thing that always made me cringe. And again, maybe in the subconsciously in my mind, I just kept thinking, I'm going to, what is it? The great savior complex, I'm going to save her, and I'm going to do something for her. And she at the time needed me, but she does not need me anymore. Harley Quinn is, such an unbelievable, amazing character with a feminist slant. I like her personally more, and I hear they nail her in Suicide Squad too. That's what I'm hearing. Like that, we're gonna see Harley. They found the best actress for her. Like they literally could not have stumbled upon a better actress to play her. I liked her in the first Suicide Squad. I thought the movie was a little over the top for my taste, tone-wise. I like her better when she's grounded in reality. And, and again, it's a taste thing for me. So
no, I agree. I think the first one was, honestly, I finished the movie saying that they didn't know what to do with this. It's like they started with one idea, then they changed their mind in the middle, then they changed their mind again. So you end up you finish the movie saying, what was the point? What did they want to do? Like that,
the Suicide Squad doesn't save the world. The Suicide Squad is the Dirty Dozen. They go and kill Saddam Hussein. They go get a prisoner out of territory and get out. So the minute it was like they're gonna stop Enchantis it was like, what do? You don't understand what the Suicide Squad's about.
Yeah.
But I think Harley stood out in that movie. You know what I'm saying? Like she definitely shined, despite the story. Her character shined.
Absolutely. If that's, as you say, the testimony to Margot Robbie.
Yeah.
She was so charismatic that, boom, the moment you see her on the screen, she completely dominates it. She's the central point. Anytime you look and she's there, she's the focus point on the movie.
Yeah. And she gets Harley. Like she really, I feel like she gets her, and you could tell in her performance. And by the way, David Ayer is a great writer and a great director. People don't realize, there were a lot of cooks in that kitchen. I don't blame David for that. David's, proven that he's a genius. Training Day is one of the best written movies.
Yeah. And I love Fury, and I love, when I watched Suicide Squad, I honestly thought, I don't know if I can blame David Ayer for this one. And people was like, what do you mean? It's like, have you watched his other movies? They're like, no, just please do me a favor. Don't say anything else. Go watch Fury, etc., and then come back to me. And the people who are like, yeah, it doesn't look like the same director at all. Like, and then, and they use the same example about, you like Damon Lindelof? Yes. Now go watch Prometheus. It's like, oh, I hate the movie. That's a very bad script. Like, it's not the script.
No,
it's not the script. It's that a director just decided to use two scripts that weren't related at all, and just pick the scenes he wanted. So as you said, sometimes you got to think, who's the cook in the table, and maybe there's too many cooks. Maybe that's not the movie he shot.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it wasn't the movie shot. It was favorite. So David did two things. I don't know him incredibly well. When the movie started, he put my comic and the script together and tweeted it out, which was very kind of him. I feel that the sort of punk rock tone of it was my book, but I felt like, one or two scenes that he took from the comic, but the rest of it was like, just, again, I didn't feel it was close to my book in any way, shape, or form. And then I met him at the premiere, and someone said, "This is Adam Glass, who wrote, the Suicide Squad book." And I remember we shook hands, and we did a pound, bro kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
As I moved in, he said, "Sorry." And I thought, oh, that's interesting, so he knew.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been calling, since they approved the Snyder Cut, which I have no interest in at all.
Yeah.
But he's been telling about the Ayer cut from Suicide Squad, and I've been saying that one I want to see.
Me too.
Because I am interested in what he did, because I think he was the perfect guy to do Suicide Squad based on, Fury. You could consider Fury is not, but you know what I mean? In a way, I kind of forget it awesome movie. And I can understand a producer saying, this guy who just did Fury, he's the perfect guy to do Suicide Squad.
Yeah.
So that cut, his cut of Suicide Squad, I could be really interested to watch. One of the fans says, "Adam, would you get married to Amanda Waller?"
It's another. It was so interesting. I love Amanda Waller. She kicks ass. I mean, I got a lot of shit again, and this. I have no control over this. The first time I wrote the Amanda Waller first scene for her in Suicide Squad, and the art came in, and I was like, "That's not Amanda Waller." That's
exactly what I said when I read the first issue, and I told you, I think, like, who's that?
Yeah. I was like, Amanda Waller's the Wall. Like, Amanda Waller is like a lot of women I grew up in New York with. She's a full-bodied woman, and that's what makes her great. And what I love about her is she's a regular person in a superhero story. She represents us. And
tough as nails, and you can see her, as one of the people, as you said, you've seen a lot of times in New York. You can relate to her.
She's the only one I ever saw in comic books stand up to Batman.
There you go.
I love that scene, and and then she just sort of, not only that, she threatens him. She's like, "That isn't that right, rich boy?" Like, she knows he's Bruce Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
And she just gets right in his face, and you never see Batman get shook. Mm-hmm. And it was like Amanda Waller shook him, and that always stood with me. So I wasn't happy about that choice, but of course, because I'm the writer, I have to say I changed Amanda Waller. And I'm like, and then so my whole job was like, if you read her and her story, I also did a one-shot of her and sort of help fill in her past and her background. I'm like, read it. She might not look like the Amanda Waller you grew up with, but she is the same Amanda Waller.
Yeah.
So her heart and soul. Amanda Waller's fierce. I'd marry her in a second.
I remember the two things that I was like, oh my God, what are they doing? Well, that was one, and the other one was Lobo.
Yeah.
When they changed Lobo to look like whatever, and I was like, who's that? No, that's Lobo. No, that's not Lobo. No, it is Lobo. Is it Lobo now? No, I'm sorry, that's not Lobo, and that woman is not Amanda Waller. That I don't care. You can tell me it is. I understand. It's a new universe, blah, blah, blah. But I'm supposed to be scared, frightened of Lobo in a way. I don't know how he's going to react. He's going to kill you, or he's going to have a party with you and beer and drink with you to death. That guy just looks like he's, a fashion model.
Yeah. No, I know. It was pretty shy. And by the way, they obviously realized their mistake with that one. I wish they would go back to the real Amanda Waller, that I grew up with.
Yeah. Anyway, we've been here for 92 minutes already. And it's 8 p.m. here, and I'm here in my kid. So I think we should wrap it up, my friend, if you're okay with that, or you want to...
I'm great, buddy. Whatever you need. It's just good to see your face and talk to you.
Okay.
By the way, again, talk about like what people might not realize. Well, how much David Macho does for artists and writers, and how much he loves comic books, and I see him always taking his time to meet and speak with new people at all the comic book conventions. This guy not only loves comics, but is such a great guy for our community, and it's why I'll ever do anything he ever needs, because You're one of the true ones, buddy. And thank you. We love you.
Thank you so much. From the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much. And I know how much I love you and your family, how much we miss you. So please stay after I cut the live feed, because I want to say proper goodbye to you. And I think probably a couple of girls in this house want to say hello to you, but they are not going to show up in camera. And to the rest of you, have a great weekend. Thank you, Adam, for being here again. Thank you for the nice words.
Thank you, everybody, and especially to Spain. I love you.
And to all of you, have a great weekend. Again, mask, don't be an asshole. And on Monday, we'll have with us Mr. Paul Jenkins.
Hey, Paul. Say hi to Paul from me.
Have fun. I will. And we're off in like 3